But thinking about, even what you put into your bedroom is going to be so different than what you put into your kitchen or your
Yes.
dining, or understanding color for each of those rooms, because especially in a residential application, we have such unique uses for each space, and they're not necessarily always big spaces either. So how do we maximize the color to the functionality and the people there? Um, how do designers explain this to clients? Because I think sometimes when we talk to clients, we have a real, not sometimes, we do have a real opportunity to add value to what we do, but sometimes it feels shishi foo foo or kind of floaty, for lack of a better word. How do we bring this down to substantive understanding and explanation to them?
Well, that is what I'm very concerned with the IICC is the scientific reasoning behind it. I don't believe that any one specific opinion about something, you can hold in gold. I think you need to, when you're dealing with things that can affect people's health, really need to consider the information and make sure it's scientifically valid. Because one thing that's very important but can be very dangerous at the same time is trends. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people will post an image of something in architecture that breaks many color rules, and psychologically you wouldn't want to be there for a long time, and everyone says, hey, they did it, this is great, when it's really for
Yeah.
show. And we always need to consider, are we in the space for a long time so it can affect us, or are we just moving through quickly?
That's so real. I was thinking back on how we had talked about shiny floors, really glossy floors or glass floors. I was at the Space Needle a couple of weeks ago, and they have made, there's two floors, and the bottom floor, the top of the Space Needle, they made glass because it used to be a restaurant. It used to, and it still spends.
Okay.
And my kids kept asking me to go step out on it, and I was like,
Hmm.
nope, nope. I realize I can tell you as a logical, rational human being that that glass will hold me and it is perfectly safe. And if you think I'm going to step on that and look straight down, you are nuts.
Yeah, it's a scary feeling.
It is the scariest
Hmm?
feeling. And that's where like this whole concept becomes very tangible to me, because logically I know that glass is great. It's totally fine. I did not step on it. And apparently I'm not alone, because they've even taken pieces of flooring now and covered up segments of the glass for people like me. It was interesting. I noticed after about the age of 15 or 20,
People
everyone
weren't
stood on the
stepping on it.
pieces that had the cover.
That's
I
very
saw the
interesting.
kids laying on the glass thinking, oh, this is the most amazing thing ever. I'm like, the beauty of youth. You don't know what you don't know. But they were not inhibited at all. But the psychological component was so real, and the environment was so real. You couldn't outthink your way around it for the most
No,
part.
that's a great way that actually color works too, because when we change color, it's hard, like people are afraid of color, I feel, to make a big change. People are comfortable choosing their clothes, some people, but when we come into an internal environment, it's difficult to choose a color, as you know, because things don't appear as you think they will. And
Well, what's
sorry.
interesting to me
Hmm.
about that is, I remember you saying, and really in America, we don't use colorists, but you look at the rest of the world, you look at Europe, you look at Canada. For instance, there's actual standalone Benjamin Moore stores in Canada. They don't go through a distributor or independents like they do in the States. But you would never consider painting your house without talking to a colorist in those areas first, those geographical regions. And somehow in the United States, I always think it's interesting. We go into a big box retailer, we look under fluorescent lights, and everyone, I feel like, as a homeowner is destined for failure. And that's obviously why you call us in for help, because we know why this is going wrong. But you're looking under those fluorescent lights again at all the colors with the wrong color temperature lights. And then you're saying, I'm going to paint my color this. And you get it home and you go, oh my gosh, this looks nothing like it. Well,
Exactly.
there's a good reason why.
There's so many levels of dissociation from everyone's eyes are different. Like you said, the lighting inside changes it compared to where the other lighting might be, the time of year. There's all these variables, which are definitely, they take a little work to condense together. One thing I believe in is we make little polarity profiles of ways of harboring information from the environment, whether it be color or structural, a kind of backliner notes. It leads into your question earlier, like what do you ask, or when you go into the environment, what kind of information do you look for? Um, and it's almost like taking a questionnaire at a restaurant. Does this place make you feel safe? Or does it feel cold or warm? And you can use adjectives in order to kind of hone in on what the architecture feels like. Because how many times do people walk in and say, how does this make me feel? Maybe if it's a church or something else, but really, you
Yeah.
don't see it anywhere else.
Well, and it was interesting. There was a space the other day that I walked into. It was actually a Starbucks in Seattle. And I think because of the challenges they've had with the homeless population, they become pretty stripped down. There's napkins are not out. There's no half and half cream pot. It's just very austere furniture. It's very modern, which is great. But
Hmm.
if they had throw pillows in there, they'd probably walk away and whatnot. And so it's just so austere. And I walked in and it was so hard surface. And I just went, oh, this feels just horrible. I'm like, even if they put one plant in here for greenery, there were wood elements, concrete elements, but it was all just hard. And the feeling was an immediate reaction walking through the door that I'm like, this doesn't feel like a Starbucks. This isn't soft and warm and embracing and like I want to cozy in with a cup of coffee.
Right?
And all of those feelings, whether they're subliminal or whether they register, they're there and they affect our buying power, the comfort we have in our homes, the way we move through various spaces throughout the day. It's
You're absolutely
unbelievable
right.
to me. And I think that's why sometimes we get to the end of the day and we're like, why are we tired as human beings? There's probably more than, there's a lot of reasons. And a lot of it has to do with our environment, which kind of gets
Absolutely.
me to what you love to do, which is get out in nature, because I love how much you rely on nature to inform your color choices. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things. So, in a nutshell, the environment that we evolved in is full of color, pattern, texture, and form that are in a kind of hierarchical, they're in an order. And so we can look out at a tree with thousands of leaves, and it's not confusing to us. We can see the pattern, it's in order. So when we come into an interior environment
Mm.
where all that color and variation and texture and form, which we thrive on. We feel good when we go into the woods, right? People say, oh, I took a walk, I feel so great. It's because,
Nature bathing.
yeah,
Yeah.
we require a certain amount of stimulation in order to feel okay. So when we go inside and we make no texture, pattern, color, it doesn't relate to the environment at all, doesn't relate to the sun, of course, our body's like,
Mm.
where are we going to be? So I've also, within the natural environment, the plants and the insects and the fungus and the trees co-evolve together and actually form the colors we have now. We kind of evolved into that. So I think it's very powerful to look to the environment, look at the systems, look at the way colors organize, because it's never arbitrary. It's either functional or structural. A hummingbird isn't just arbitrary colors, it's all in some kind of proportion. And I like to
Hmm.
try to create tools to harvest color connections and harmonies from the environment. And a big part of that is proportion and space and intensity, all those little rules of color that seem not very important until you actually start working with color in a space.
I feel like, especially when you make a mistake, I want to say mistake because sometimes it's intentional too, but we often, one thing that I love that you discussed is the order of color in relationship to the environment. For instance, like we would typically never paint a ceiling black. Well, why is that? Why does that feel oppressive and horrible? Because black in nature is found in dirt and that goes on the bottom,
Right.
not the top.